Do not open that door, Clara. Not unless you are ready to learn why my family locked it for 20 years. I heard those words before I even knew the room existed. At the time, I was standing in the west hallway of the Blackwell mansion with a feather duster in one hand and a ring of brass keys in the other, listening to rain tap against windows taller than my entire apartment. My name is Clara Bennett. I was 29 years old, plus size, white-skinned, and employed as a maid in a house where one dining table probably cost more than everything I owned. I had learned not to stare at marble floors, crystal chandeliers, or paintings that probably had their own insurance policies. I had also learned not to ask questions. Questions were expensive in the Blackwell house. Silence was free. The man who owned it was Ethan Blackwell, 38, white-skinned, always dressed in black, always calm, always surrounded by the kind of quiet respect that made conversations stop when he entered a room. He was known in certain circles as a Mafia Boss, although nobody in the mansion ever said that title aloud. I did not need anyone to explain it. I had seen enough. Ethan was tall, broad-shouldered, and covered in tattoos from his neck all the way down his arms and beneath his clothes. The ink was impossible to ignore when his sleeves were rolled up, intricate black patterns disappearing beneath his collar and cuffs like a map to a life he never discussed. But that evening, he was not the reason I was in the west hallway. The reason was much simpler. Mrs. Blackwell had asked me to clean the old library wing. That wing had been closed for years. Dust covered the shelves. The air smelled like cedar, old paper, and rain. I had just finished wiping a narrow console table when I noticed the door at the end of the corridor. It was different from every other door. Dark wood, brass handle, no number, no plaque, just a tiny brass keyhole beneath an old-fashioned lock. I should have walked past it. Instead, I stopped. Curiosity is a dangerous thing when you work for people who have secrets. I touched the handle. Locked. Clara. I nearly dropped the duster. Ethan stood behind me. I turned slowly. He had removed his suit jacket, leaving a black shirt fitted neatly across his shoulders, the tattoos at his neck visible beneath the open collar. His expression was unreadable. I was cleaning, I said. His eyes moved to the door. I can see that. Mrs. Blackwell told me to clean this hallway. She did. Then I am not doing anything wrong. His gaze returned to mine. I did not say you were. I looked at the door again. What is in there? Silence. Rain whispered against the windows. Somewhere downstairs, a clock chimed 8 times. Ethan stepped closer, but stopped several feet away. Nothing you need to worry about. That answer bothered me more than a warning would have. That usually means there is something worth worrying about. His eyebrow lifted. You always talk this much. Only when people give me incomplete answers. Something almost like amusement crossed his face. Almost. Then he looked at the keys in my hand. Give me those. I glanced down. Why? Because one of them opens that door. My fingers tightened around the ring. I did not know that. I know. Then how did you know I had it? Ethan's face changed. Barely, but enough. Because I gave you the keys this morning. I stared at him. He was right. I remembered. Front hall, kitchen, library, storage room, west wing. The last key had been heavier than the others, but I had never thought about why. I held the ring out. Ethan reached for it, then stopped before taking it. Clara. His voice was quieter now. Do not open that door. I swallowed. Why? He looked directly at me. Because some things are easier to leave forgotten. He took the keys and walked away. I watched him disappear around the corner. Then I looked at the locked door again. I should have returned to work. I should have listened. Instead, I noticed something on the floor near the baseboard. A small brass key. Not the one Ethan had taken. Older. Scratched. Almost hidden beneath the edge of the rug. I crouched and picked it up. My heart started beating faster. I looked down the empty hallway. Then I looked at the door. The key fit perfectly. The lock clicked. I froze. I could have walked away. I should have. But then I heard something from inside. Not a voice. Not footsteps. Just the soft metallic sound of something shifting against wood. I opened the door an inch. Darkness waited beyond it. I pushed it wider. A single lamp flickered on automatically. And there, covering the far wall, was a collection of photographs. Ethan Blackwell as a child. Ethan as a teenager. Ethan standing beside his parents. Ethan beside a woman I had never seen before. I stepped closer. Then I saw the photograph in the center. My breath caught. The woman in it was holding a small silver locket against her chest. I knew that locket. I had worn it every day since my grandmother gave it to me. And beneath the photograph, written in faded black ink, were 4 words that made my hands go cold. Clara Bennett. Do not trust them. The words beneath the photograph would not leave my mind. Clara Bennett. Do not trust them. I stood inside the hidden room with the old key pressed between my fingers, staring at my own name as if it belonged to someone else. My first instinct was to leave. My second was to take the photograph with me. I did neither. I stepped closer instead. The woman in the picture looked young, maybe 25, with pale skin, dark hair, and the same silver locket I had worn since I was 16. Her hand rested on the shoulder of a little boy. Ethan. I knew it immediately. The shape of his face was younger, softer, but unmistakable. I looked around the room. Photographs covered the walls, but there were no labels except dates written in faded ink. 1998, 2001, 2004. Then one date made my chest tighten. 2006. I was born in 1997. My mother had always told me she came to Ohio shortly before I was born. She never talked about New York, and she never talked about the Blackwell family. Whenever I asked about my father, she would simply say, "Some stories are better left where they ended." I had thought that was grief. Now I wondered if it had been fear. A floorboard creaked behind me. I turned. Ethan stood in the doorway. I almost dropped the photograph. His eyes moved from me to the wall, then to the open door. His face became completely still. Clara. My name sounded different in his voice this time. Not like an employee being called to work. Like a memory he had not expected to see walking toward him. You told me not to open it. Yes. I opened it. His gaze settled on the photograph in my hand. I can see that. I held it out. Who is she? Ethan did not take it. Put it down. Who is she? His jaw tightened. Clara. Put the photograph down. You knew I would find this. I knew you might. And you knew my name was in here. His silence answered for him. My heart began beating harder. How long have you known my name? Ethan finally stepped into the room. The light from the hallway touched the tattoos along his neck, but his expression was nothing like the intimidating man I had seen downstairs. He looked tired. Not physically. Somewhere deeper. I knew your last name when you applied for the position. I stared at him. Then why did you hire me? Because your last name was not the reason you deserved the job. That is not an answer. It is the answer I can give you right now. I laughed once, but there was no humor in it. You are unbelievable. Probably. You knew my name was connected to this family, and you said nothing. I did not know how. How what? Ethan looked toward the photograph. How much your mother had told you. That stopped me. You knew my mother? He said nothing. I took one step closer. Ethan, did you know my mother? His eyes met mine. Yes. One word. It changed the room. I could hear rain against the windows again. I could hear the faint hum of the heating system. I could hear my own breathing. How? I asked. Ethan looked at the photograph. She worked for my family. As what? As my father's assistant. I stared at him. My mother had never mentioned the Blackwells. Not once. Why would she leave? Ethan's expression shifted. That is the part one do not understand. Then explain the note. I pointed toward the wall. Explain why someone wrote my name and told me not to trust your family. Ethan walked toward the photographs. He stopped beneath the picture of the woman with the locket. Her name was Eleanor Blackwell. I frowned. Blackwell? My aunt. My stomach dropped. Your aunt. He nodded. My father's younger sister. I looked at the photograph again. The woman holding the locket was family. Ethan's family. And somehow, she had been connected to my mother. Why does she have my locket? I asked. Ethan looked at me. I do not know. You expect me to believe that? No, his answer was immediate. I expect you to ask questions. I stared at him. That was not what I expected. Ethan was always certain, always controlled. But standing in that room, surrounded by old photographs, he seemed to have fewer answers than I did. Then I have one more question. Ask. I touched the locket at my throat. Where did my mother get this? Ethan's eyes dropped to it. Something changed in his face. Recognition. Not surprise this time. Something deeper. That locket belonged to Eleanor. I stopped breathing for a second. You are saying my mother took it? No. Ethan stepped closer to the photograph, studying the small silver pendant. I am saying she gave it to your mother. My fingers closed around the locket. Why? Ethan looked at me. That is the question I have been trying to answer for 20 years. Then I think we have been asking the wrong question. I said it quietly, but Ethan heard me. He stood beside the old photograph, one hand resting against the edge of the wooden frame, his tattoos disappearing beneath the black fabric at his wrists. "What should we be asking?" he said. I touched the silver locket at my throat. "Not why Eleanor gave this to my mother. We should ask why she needed my mother to have it." Ethan studied me for a long moment. Then he walked to a narrow cabinet beneath the photographs and opened a drawer. "There is something I never told you. That sentence is becoming a habit." His mouth almost moved into a smile, but it disappeared before it fully arrived. He pulled out a thin envelope. The paper was yellowed with age. My name was not on it. My mother's was. I stared at the handwriting. I knew it immediately. My mother wrote her letters in narrow, careful lines, with every word pressed firmly into the page. "Where did you get that?" I asked. "It was in my father's study." "You have had it for 20 years. "Yes. And you never opened it." Ethan looked at me. "It was addressed to your mother." I understood. He had kept a letter that did not belong to him. For all his wealth and authority, there was something strangely old-fashioned about that restraint. "Why show me now?" I asked. "Because you found the room. That is not enough." "No," he looked toward the window. "It is not." He handed me the envelope. My fingers felt strangely numb as I turned it over. The seal had already been broken. "You said you never opened it." Ethan's eyes met mine. "I did not." "Then who did?" He did not answer. I looked at the torn edge again. "Someone else has read this." "Probably. And you still kept it here?" I did not know what else to do with it. That answer sounded less like the Mafia Boss everyone whispered about, and more like a man who had spent years carrying a question he could never solve. I opened the letter. The first line made my chest tighten. "Clara, if you ever receive this, it means I could not come back for you." I stopped reading. Ethan did not move. "What does it say?" he asked. I looked up. "It is from my mother." His face changed. "Read it." I continued. "She wrote about Eleanor. About the Blackwell mansion. About a promise made between two women who believed they were protecting someone. But the details were scattered, as though my mother had been afraid to write too much. She never said what she was protecting me from. She only wrote that Eleanor had trusted the wrong person inside her own family." I lowered the page. "Ethan, what?" "Your aunt did not disappear because she wanted to leave." His expression became still. "What did she tell my mother?" "She wrote that someone in the family was changing financial records." Ethan looked toward the old photographs. "That cannot be right." "Why?" "Because the records were never investigated." "Exactly." He looked back at me. I held up the letter. "My mother says Eleanor believed someone was using your father's name to move money without permission." Ethan's eyes hardened with concentration. "How much?" "She did not say." "Why would Eleanor involve your mother?" "Because my mother was the assistant." "That does not explain the locket." I looked down at the silver pendant. "Maybe it does." Ethan stepped closer. "How?" "My mother always told me this belonged to someone who trusted her." I swallowed. "She never said who." Ethan stared at the locket. "Eleanor trusted your mother." "Yes." "Then why did your mother leave?" I looked at the letter again. There was a final sentence near the bottom that I had missed. My breath caught. I read it aloud. "If the Blackwell family ever finds Clara, do not let them tell her who she is." Ethan went completely silent. I slowly lowered the letter. "What does that mean?" He looked at me, and for the first time since I had met him, the answer seemed to frighten him more than the question. "I do not know." "You are lying." His eyes narrowed. "Why would you say that?" "Because you looked at the photograph before I did. You knew my name was written there. You knew about my mother. You knew about the locket." I stepped closer. "There is something you have not told me." Ethan did not deny it. He walked back to the cabinet and removed another file. This one was thicker. He placed it on the table between us. "I found this 6 months ago." I stared at him. "And you never told me?" "I did not know whether you were ready." "You do not get to decide that." The words came sharper than I intended. Ethan accepted them without argument. "You are right." That surprised me. I opened the file. The first page was a copy of a birth record. My name appeared near the top. Clara Bennett. I looked at the date. I knew it by heart. Then I saw the second name beneath mine. My mother's name was there. But the third line made my hand stop moving. "Father, unknown." Ethan watched me carefully. "That is what I found 6 months ago." I turned the page. Behind the birth record was an older document, one I had never seen. A handwritten note. One sentence. Clara was never supposed to grow up believing she was alone. I looked at Ethan. "Who wrote this?" He took a slow breath. "My aunt." "Your aunt." I repeated. The words barely sounded like mine. Ethan stood across the old wooden table, his expression unreadable, but I could see something underneath it now. Uncertainty. For the first time, the man who seemed to have an answer for everything was standing in front of me without one. I looked again at the handwritten note. Clara was never supposed to grow up believing she was alone. My thumb moved across the faded ink. Why would Eleanor write this about me? Ethan shook his head. I do not know. You keep saying that. Because it is true. Then help me understand. Ethan looked toward the photographs covering the wall. Eleanor was different from the rest of my family. She questioned everything. Accounts, contracts, decisions my father made. She believed someone was using the family name for things my father did not authorize. The financial records. Yes. And my mother knew. She probably knew more than I did. I stared at him. You were there. I was 16. His voice softened. I knew something was wrong. I did not understand what it was. That stopped me. Ethan rarely spoke about being young. I had never imagined him as a 16-year-old boy standing inside this same mansion, surrounded by secrets he could not understand. What happened to Eleanor? I asked. He looked down. She left New York in 2006. That is what your family says. His eyes lifted. Yes. My mother's letter says something different. I know. Then why did you believe the family story? Ethan was silent for several seconds. Because my father showed me a letter from Eleanor. My stomach tightened. What did it say? That she wanted distance. That she did not want anyone following her. That she was finished with the family. And you believed it? I was 16. Again, that answer. Simple. Human. It changed something inside me. I had spent so long thinking of Ethan Blackwell as a man who controlled every room he entered. Yet there had been a younger version of him trapped inside the same house, trusting the adults around him because he had no reason not to. I looked at the old photograph. Eleanor was smiling beside him. Her hand rested gently on his shoulder. She loved you, I said. Ethan looked away. She was the only person in my family who treated me like a person before she treated me like a Blackwell. The sentence stayed between us. I lowered my eyes to the file. Then we need to find out what happened to her. Ethan looked at me sharply. No, you are not getting involved in this. I almost laughed. Ethan, my name is on your wall. My mother wrote a letter about me. Your aunt left a note about my life. I think I am already involved. You do not understand what this family can become when old secrets surface. Then explain it to me. I am trying to protect you. I did not ask you to. His expression tightened. I knew that look. It was the same one he wore when someone challenged him downstairs. But I was not one of his employees. I was not one of the people who lowered their voices when he entered a room. I was Clara Bennett, a plus-size maid with a second-hand car, a modest apartment, and absolutely no interest in being treated like a fragile ornament. You cannot decide what I am allowed to know, I said. Ethan stared at me. You are right. I blinked. What? You are right. He reached into the file and pulled out another document. There is something else. I took it from him. It was a property record from 2006. The address was unfamiliar. A small house in Connecticut. The owner was Eleanor Blackwell. But beneath her name was another name. My mother's. Why would my mother be listed here? I whispered. I do not know. Ethan, I found the property 6 months ago. I went there. My eyes lifted. You went there? He nodded. The house is empty now. Was anything inside? A few old boxes. And Ethan hesitated. One photograph. My pulse quickened. Of Eleanor? No, he looked directly at me. Of your mother. I stopped moving. You have it. Yes. Where? Ethan turned toward the cabinet. He opened a lower drawer and removed a small envelope. He placed it on the table. I reached for it, but he did not let go immediately. Our eyes met. Clara, whatever is in this photograph, it may change what you believe about your mother. I slowly pulled the envelope free. Maybe it is time I knew the truth. I opened it. A photograph slid into my palm. My mother was standing outside a small white house, younger than I had ever seen her, holding a baby wrapped in a pale blanket. I stared at the baby's face. Then I noticed the person standing beside her. Eleanor Blackwell. But Eleanor was not looking at the camera. She was looking directly at the baby. And in her hand was the same silver locket I had worn around my neck for 13 years. I turned the photograph over. There was a date. October 14th, 1997. My birthday. Beneath it, in Eleanor's handwriting, were 6 words. She is the reason I cannot stay. : Writing variant equals document ID equals 61427. She is the reason I cannot stay. I read the sentence again, but the words did not become easier. My mother had been standing beside Eleanor Blackwell on the day I was born, and now I was holding proof that my entire childhood had been built around a secret neither woman ever explained. Ethan remained across from me, silent beneath the photographs. What does that mean? I asked. I do not know. You said that before. Because I still do not know. I looked at the photograph again. My mother was younger. Eleanor was beside her, and in my mother's arms was a newborn baby wrapped in a pale blanket. Me. Then we find out, I said. Ethan's expression tightened. Clara, this is not something you should chase alone. I am not asking to chase it alone. He looked at me. What are you asking? The truth. Rain had stopped outside, leaving the tall windows covered with tiny silver drops. For a few seconds, neither of us moved. Then Ethan picked up the property record from the table. The Connecticut house is about 2 hours from here. Then we go. Tonight. Why not? Because it is almost 9. I looked at the clock. And his eyebrow lifted. You work here. I am aware. You have an early morning tomorrow. I clean rooms, Ethan. I am not running a corporation. That almost made him smile. Almost. You are stubborn. You are controlling. Fair. He gathered the documents. I watched him carefully. You are actually coming with me? I am not letting you walk into an abandoned house connected to my family without knowing what you might find. That sounds suspiciously like protection. It is caution. Whatever helps you sleep. He gave me a look. You really do talk too much. And you really do avoid questions. We left the room together. The mansion felt different as we walked through it. The polished marble, the enormous paintings, the quiet staff moving carefully through the halls. Everything looked exactly as it had that morning, yet I no longer saw it as simply a wealthy home. I saw layers, secrets, missing pieces, a history that had been carefully folded away. Ethan stopped beside the front door. You can stay here. I looked at him. No, Clara. I am going. He studied me for a moment, then nodded. Fine. The drive through Connecticut was quiet at first. Ethan drove a black sedan instead of the larger vehicles I usually saw around the mansion. I sat beside him with the photograph resting in my lap. Streetlights passed across the windshield in slow golden flashes. Tell me about Eleanor, I said. Ethan kept his eyes on the road. She was 12 years older than me. She taught me how to play chess. She made terrible coffee. She hated expensive restaurants. I smiled despite myself. She sounds reasonable. She also had a habit of asking questions nobody wanted to answer. I like her already. Ethan glanced at me. You would have. The words were quiet, almost sad. I looked out the window. What happened after she left? My father stopped talking about her. And your mother? She followed his lead. What about you? Ethan's hands tightened slightly around the steering wheel. I kept waiting for Eleanor to come back. I looked at him. How long? Years. That single word carried more weight than any explanation could have. We finally reached the small Connecticut town just after 11. The house stood at the end of a narrow road surrounded by bare trees and overgrown shrubs. It was smaller than I expected. White siding, green shutters, a porch with 2 empty flower boxes. Ethan parked near the curb. We stepped out. Cold air rushed across my face. I looked at the house and felt something strange. Not fear. Recognition. I have seen this place, I whispered. Ethan turned. What? In my dreams. He stared at me. Clara, I know how that sounds. I walked toward the porch. But I remember a window. A white curtain. Someone holding me. Ethan followed. The front door was unlocked. Inside, the house smelled like dust and cedar. Moonlight spilled through the windows. We searched room by room until Ethan stopped in a small bedroom at the back. There was an old wooden dresser against the wall. I walked toward it without knowing why. One drawer opened easily. Inside was a folded baby blanket. My hands trembled as I touched it. Beneath the blanket was a small envelope. No name. No address. Just a date. October 14th, 1997. My birthday. Ethan stood behind me. Open it, he whispered. I unfolded the paper inside. Only one sentence had been written. I gave Clara to the one person I believed would never betray me. I looked at Ethan. Who was that person? His face had gone completely still. Then he looked at the photograph in my hand. Your mother. I shook my head. That cannot be the whole story. Ethan reached for another paper beneath the envelope. It was an old financial record. My mother's name appeared. Colon. The name beside the transaction was Ethan's father, Richard Blackwell, and suddenly the little bedroom felt smaller than it had a moment before. I stared at the record until the printed letters blurred. Why would your father send money to my mother 1 week before I was born? Ethan did not answer immediately. He took the document from my hand and studied it under the weak light from the hallway. His face had changed. The controlled expression was gone. I have never seen this record, but it has your family name on it. I know. And my mother's name. I know, Clara. His voice was quiet. I looked around the room. The faded wallpaper. The old dresser. The folded blanket. Suddenly, everything felt connected. My birth. Eleanor. My mother. The Blackwell family. A payment made 7 days before I entered the world. Maybe my mother was working for your father, I said. She was. Then maybe this was her salary. Ethan shook his head. The amount is too large. I looked at the number. I had never been comfortable with money, but even I knew that amount was not an ordinary paycheck. How much was it? I asked. $35,000. My breath caught. In 1997? Yes. I looked back at the record. $35,000 was not a casual payment. It was a decision. What was your father buying? Ethan's eyes lifted. I do not know. You keep saying that. Because nobody told me. He folded the document carefully. But I can find out. How? There are archived records. From 29 years ago. My family kept everything. I almost smiled. Of course they did. Ethan looked toward the old dresser. There may be more. He opened another drawer. Nothing. Then another. Empty. I moved toward the closet. Something about the room felt familiar, but I could not explain why. I opened the closet door and found an old wooden box on the floor. Ethan came beside me. Do you recognize it? No, I knelt and lifted the lid. Inside were several folded papers, a faded blue ribbon, and another photograph. This one showed Eleanor holding a baby. My baby. My eyes moved to the background. A white curtain. The same curtain I had remembered seeing when I entered the house. My fingers trembled. I remember this. Ethan looked at me. You were here. I do not know. I closed my eyes. A faint memory surfaced. Warm light. A woman humming softly. The smell of cinnamon. A silver chain against my cheek. Then my mother's voice. You are safe. I opened my eyes. Ethan was watching me. What did you remember? My mother was here. Are you sure? I remember the curtain. I pointed toward the window. That one. Ethan looked at it, then back at me. You were a baby, Clara. I know how memory works. Then why do you remember this house? That is what I am trying to understand. He reached into the wooden box and found a folded letter. The paper was brittle. The handwriting belonged to Eleanor. I knew it before Ethan confirmed it. Read it, I said. He unfolded the page. His eyes moved across the first lines. Then he stopped. What? I asked. He handed it to me. The letter was addressed to my mother. Eleanor wrote that she had discovered something wrong with the family accounts. Someone had been moving money through private agreements and disguising the transfers as legitimate expenses. She believed Richard knew more than he admitted. But that was not the part that made my hands shake. Eleanor wrote that she had discovered a second secret. A child. A child who had been born under circumstances that could destroy the Blackwell family if the truth became public. I read the sentence twice. Ethan. He was already looking at me. The child was you, he said. I shook my head. That is impossible. Why? Because I am not a Blackwell. Ethan said nothing. My mother raised me. My last name is Bennett. My birth certificate says Clara Bennett. Your birth certificate also says your father is unknown. That does not mean your father was my father. Ethan looked back at the letter. No, it does not. I felt a strange calm settle over me. Not relief. Not fear. Something sharper. The need to know. Then we find the missing records. Ethan nodded. Yes. And we do not hide anything from each other. He looked at me for several seconds. Agreed. I held out my hand. Promise. His eyes dropped to my hand, then returned to my face. He took it briefly. I promise. It was the first promise Ethan Blackwell had ever made to me without using power, money, or authority. Then something slipped from inside the old letter and landed on the floor. A small folded card. I picked it up. There were only 3 words written across the front. Ask your mother. I looked at Ethan. My mother knows. He nodded slowly. Then we need to talk to her. I stared at the card again. After 29 years of believing my past was simple, I suddenly understood something painful. My mother had not forgotten the truth. She had been protecting it. And somewhere in that old house, Eleanor Blackwell had left one final reason why. Ask your mother. 3 words should not have been enough to change everything. But they did. Ethan and I drove back to New York before sunrise, the old documents secured inside a folder on his passenger seat. I watched the highway lights disappear behind us, one after another, while the question followed me through every mile. What had my mother been protecting me from? Ethan drove quietly. His hands remained steady on the wheel, but I could tell he was thinking. You should call her, he said. I looked at him. I know. Then, call her. You are very good at giving orders. I am trying to be useful. That is new. His eyes moved toward me for half a second. You noticed? I almost smiled. Almost. I took out my phone and stared at my mother's name. Her name was still saved exactly as it had been since I first got a cell phone. Mom. Simple. Familiar. Safe. Now, even that felt complicated. I pressed call. She answered on the 4th ring. Clara. Her voice was sleepy. Mom, I need to ask you something. Silence. Not long. Just long enough. What happened? She asked. I looked at Ethan. How do you know something happened? Another silence. Then my mother said, Where are you? I swallowed. With Ethan Blackwell. The silence that followed was different. It had weight. Clara, listen to me carefully. My heart began pounding. You need to come home. Why? Just come home. Mom, I found a photograph. Her breathing changed. What photograph? One of you and Eleanor Blackwell. Nothing. Mom, where did you find it? Her voice had become quiet. At an old house in Connecticut. Ethan looked at me sharply. My mother exhaled. Then it has started. I stared at the windshield. What has started? The truth. The call ended. I lowered the phone slowly. Ethan's expression had become serious. She knows. Yes. More than she ever told you. Yes. We arrived at my apartment shortly after 6 in the morning. My mother lived only 20 minutes away, and by the time we reached her building, she was already waiting outside. She looked smaller than I remembered, wrapped in a gray cardigan with her silver hair pulled back. When she saw Ethan, she stopped. Then she looked at me. You should not have brought him. Ethan remained beside the car. I can leave. My mother shook her head. No. If he is finally asking questions, he should hear the answers. I stared at her. You knew? She looked at the locket around my neck. I knew everything. My throat tightened. Then why did you lie to me? I did not lie about loving you. That is not what I asked. Her eyes filled with tears, but she did not look away. No, it is not. We went upstairs. My mother made coffee because that was what she always did when something was difficult. Ethan sat at the kitchen table, unusually quiet. I remained standing. Start with Eleanor. My mother placed a mug in front of Ethan. Eleanor saved your life. I froze. What? Before you were born, she discovered that Richard Blackwell was moving money through accounts that were not supposed to exist. Ethan looked down. My father. Yes. My mother sat across from me. But Eleanor discovered something else. Richard had planned to use a private agreement involving a child to protect his business interests. Ethan's expression changed. What child? My mother looked at me. You, Clara. The room went silent. That does not make sense. Eleanor believed your birth could expose what Richard had been doing. She wanted you away from the Blackwell name. Why? Because your existence was connected to a financial agreement your father never intended anyone to discover. I stared at her. My father. My mother closed her eyes. Yes. Ethan slowly looked at me. I could not breathe. Who was he? My mother looked toward Ethan. That is the part one hoped you would never have to know. Ethan did not move. Tell her, he said softly. My mother shook her head. Richard was not Clara's father. Relief came first. Then confusion. Then who was? My mother looked at Ethan. Eleanor's brother. Ethan's face went completely still. My mother whispered the name. Daniel Blackwell. I stared at Ethan. His eyes widened. Daniel Blackwell was his uncle. Eleanor's brother. The family member who had disappeared from every photograph after 1997. The man whose name was absent from every document I had seen. My mother reached across the table and took my hand. Clara, you were never a secret because you were shameful. You were a secret because Eleanor believed the Blackwell family would use your existence for their own purposes. I looked at Ethan. And you knew nothing? He shook his head. No, for once, I believed him completely. My mother stood and walked to an old cabinet. She removed a small envelope from behind a stack of dishes. Eleanor gave me this the night you were born. She placed it on the table. My name was written across the front. Clara Bennett. I looked at Ethan, then at my mother. Why did you keep this for 29 years? My mother's eyes filled again. Because Eleanor told me to open it only when you were old enough to choose what to do with the truth. My fingers moved toward the envelope. I stopped before touching it. For the first time, I understood that knowing the truth was not the same as being ready for it. Then Ethan spoke quietly beside me. Whatever is inside, Clara, you decide what happens next. I looked at him. Not the mafia boss. Not the man everyone feared. Just Ethan. And somehow, that was the first time I trusted him. Some truths do not set you free. They ask you to decide what kind of person you will become. I stared at the envelope on my mother's kitchen table, my name written across it in Eleanor's handwriting. Clara Bennett, 29 years old. One name, one secret, one family I had never known was connected to me. Ethan sat quietly across from me while my mother waited beside the sink. Nobody rushed me. That mattered. I picked up the envelope. The paper felt fragile beneath my fingers, but the question inside it felt heavier. If I open this, I said, there is no going back. My mother nodded. No, I looked at Ethan. He did not tell me what to do. He did not reach for the envelope. He simply waited. That small act told me more about him than all the stories I had heard about the mafia boss who could make entire rooms fall silent. I opened the envelope. Inside was a letter and a small photograph. The photograph showed Eleanor standing beside my mother outside the same Connecticut house we had visited hours earlier. My mother was holding me as a newborn. Eleanor was smiling, but her eyes looked tired. I turned the photograph over. There were words on the back. Clara, if you are reading this, you are old enough to choose your own name, your own family, and your own future. I swallowed hard. Then I opened the letter. My dear Margaret, if you have kept your promise, Clara has grown up knowing kindness before power. That is all I ever wanted for her. I looked at my mother. You promised her? Yes. What did you promise? My mother sat down. That I would keep you away from the Blackwell name until you were old enough to understand what it meant. I looked at Ethan. He remained silent. I continued reading. Eleanor explained that Daniel Blackwell, Ethan's uncle, had discovered Richard's hidden financial arrangements and refused to participate. Daniel had wanted to expose the truth. But Eleanor believed the family would try to use Clara's connection to Daniel as leverage in their private affairs. She wanted me far away from the mansion, the accounts, and the expectations that came with the Blackwell name. Then I reached the part that changed everything. Eleanor wrote that Daniel had never abandoned me. He had asked to meet me after I was born. He had wanted to know his daughter. I stopped reading. My father knew about me. My mother closed her eyes. Yes. And he wanted to see me? Yes. Then why did I never meet him? My mother looked toward the window. Because he disappeared before he could. Ethan leaned forward slightly. What happened to Daniel? My mother looked at him. That is what Eleanor never told me. Ethan's expression tightened. My uncle vanished in 1997. I know. My father said Daniel left because he was ashamed of the family. My mother shook her head. That was not true. I looked at Ethan. You believed that. I was 16. His voice was quiet. I believed whatever my father told me. I lowered the letter. Suddenly the family history looked different. Ethan had spent 20 years believing his uncle had chosen to leave. My mother had spent 29 years protecting me from a family she believed could turn my identity into a tool. Eleanor had spent her final known days trying to make sure I could grow up ordinary. And Daniel had apparently wanted something as simple as knowing his daughter. There is more, I said. My mother looked at me. What? I turned the letter around. A second page was folded behind the first. I opened it. Eleanor had written one final instruction. If Clara ever discovers the truth, do not take her to Richard. Take her to the person who understands what it means to lose a family without losing your humanity. Beneath those words was a name. Ethan Blackwell. I looked up. Ethan had gone completely still. She wrote your name. I see that. Why would she trust you? He looked at the letter for several seconds. Maybe she knew I would not become my father. My mother quietly said, Eleanor believed you could be different. Ethan looked at me. I do not know if she was right. I folded the letter. Neither do I. He nodded. That is fair. I stood and placed the documents back inside the envelope. I need time. Ethan immediately stood. Then take it. I am not going back to the mansion tonight. You do not have to. And I am not agreeing to become part of your family. I did not ask you to. Good. I walked toward the door. Ethan followed, but stopped before reaching it. Clara. I turned. What? His voice was calm. You asked earlier why I hired you. I waited. The truth is, when I saw your application, I recognized your mother's name. I wanted to know whether you were connected to Eleanor. My chest tightened. So, I was an investigation to you. At first, the honesty hurt more than a lie would have. And now, Ethan looked at me for a long moment. Now you are the first person who has made me question everything I thought I knew. I looked away. That is not an answer. It is the only honest one I have. I opened the door. Cold morning air entered the hallway. Then I noticed something on the floor beside Ethan's car. A small envelope. No address. No name. Ethan picked it up and opened it. His eyes moved across the page. What does it say? I asked. He handed it to me. There were only 2 sentences. Daniel Blackwell did not disappear. He chose to disappear. And if you want to know why, ask the woman who raised Clara what she promised him. I looked at my mother through the open doorway. Her face had gone pale. For 29 years, she had protected my childhood. Now I finally understood that the promise she made was not simply about keeping me away from the Blackwells. It was about keeping one final truth hidden from me. And this time, I knew I would not let anyone choose whether I was ready to hear it. : Writing variant equals document ID equals 38154. What did you promise him? I asked. My mother did not answer. The silence was enough. Ethan stood beside me in the cold morning air, the anonymous letter still in his hand. For once, the man who always seemed to know what came next looked completely uncertain. I turned toward my mother. Mom, I need the truth. She closed her eyes. I promised Daniel that if anything happened, I would never tell you where he went. My heart stopped. He was alive? Yes. Ethan looked at her sharply. Where? My mother shook her head. I do not know where he is now. But you knew where he went. Yes. For how long? Years. I felt something inside me crack. Not anger. Something deeper. You let me believe my father never wanted me. Tears gathered in her eyes. I wanted you to have a normal life. You could have told me he wanted me. And then what? You would have spent your childhood searching for a man connected to a family that had already caused enough confusion. Ethan stepped closer, but I raised my hand. Not yet. He stopped immediately. I looked at my mother. Why did Daniel disappear? She finally sat down on the front step. Because Eleanor discovered that Richard had been hiding money through several companies. Daniel found the records. He wanted to report everything. But before he could, Eleanor learned that Richard knew about Clara. My mother looked at me. Daniel was terrified that your existence would become part of the dispute. So he left. He made a choice. He believed that if the Blackwells could not find him, they could not use him to reach you. I looked toward Ethan. And you? He understood the question. I knew Daniel had disappeared. I did not know why. Did your father ever mention me? No. Did he mention Eleanor? Only as someone who betrayed the family. My mother gave a quiet, bitter laugh. That was Richard's favorite version of the story. Ethan looked down. I believed him. I touched the locket at my neck. Where did Daniel go? My mother reached into her cardigan pocket and removed a small piece of paper. This is the last address he gave me. I unfolded it. A town in Maine. A street name. A small number. Nothing else. Ethan looked at it. That is 6 hours from here. Then, we drive 6 hours, I said. My mother stared at me. Clara, you do not know what you will find. I looked at her. For 29 years, everyone else decided what I could handle. That ends today. Ethan nodded. I will take you. I looked at him. You do not have to. I know. You might discover things about your family that you do not want to hear. I already have. We drove north that morning. The city disappeared behind us. Buildings became open fields, then pine trees, then long stretches of quiet highway. Ethan did not ask me to trust him. He simply drove. After 3 hours, I finally said, Why are you doing this? Because you deserve answers. That is not the whole reason. His eyes stayed on the road. No. Then tell me the rest. He took a breath. Because I spent most of my life believing power meant controlling what happened around me. Then you walked into my house and started asking questions nobody else dared to ask. I smiled faintly. That sounds like a complaint. It is not. Good. We continued north. Near sunset, we reached the small coastal town listed on the paper. The address led us to a modest blue house overlooking the water. No gates. No guards. No mansion. Just a porch, 2 wooden chairs, and a mailbox covered with peeling paint. I stepped out of the car. My hands felt cold. Ethan remained beside me. Ready? He asked. I looked at the house. No, he nodded. Neither am I. We walked to the door. I knocked once. Nothing. I knocked again. A long moment passed. Then the door opened. An older man stood there with silver hair, tired eyes, and the same deep gray eyes I had seen in my own reflection for years. I could not move. He looked at me, then at the locket around my neck. His hand slowly covered his mouth. Clara. My breath disappeared. I looked at Ethan. He did not say a word. He did not need to. I turned back to the man standing in the doorway. Daniel. His eyes filled with tears. You look just like your mother. I laughed once, but it came out broken. My mother told me you were gone. I was. She said you disappeared. I did. Why? Daniel looked toward Ethan. His expression changed. You brought a Blackwell. Ethan stepped forward. I am Ethan. Daniel stared at him. I know who you are. Then you know I did not know about Clara. Daniel looked back at me. I believe you. I swallowed. Did you know about me? His eyes softened. Every single year. That sentence hurt more than anything else. Then why did you never come back? Daniel looked toward the ocean. Because Eleanor made me promise. Promise what? He looked directly at me. That I would stay away until the Blackwell family could no longer use your existence against you. I touched the locket. And now? Daniel glanced at Ethan. Now the old family has changed. Ethan's face became serious. What does that mean? Daniel stepped aside. Come in. We entered the small house. On the wall were photographs. Eleanor. My mother. Daniel. And one picture that made me stop. It showed Eleanor holding baby Clara while Daniel stood beside her. But in the background was Richard Blackwell. He was not looking at the baby. He was looking directly at Eleanor. Daniel saw my expression. There is one thing you still do not know. I turned toward him. What? He looked at Ethan. Your father did not pay your mother to hide Clara. Ethan went still. Daniel continued quietly. He paid her because he wanted to know where Clara would be. I felt the room tilt beneath me. Ethan stared at the photograph. Why? Daniel looked at me. Because Richard knew Clara was the one person who could eventually expose everything he had hidden. I held my locket tightly. All these years, I had thought my ordinary life was something my mother had created to protect me from the Blackwell family. Now I understood something far more complicated. My ordinary life had never been an accident. It had been a shield. And somewhere along the way, Ethan Blackwell had,